Hello good people, I'm going to talk about naming binary covalent compounds. Recall that the word binary compound simply means that the compound is made up of two different types of atoms. The conventions for naming covalent compounds are similar to the conventions for naming ionic compounds. There are a few differences that we need to be aware of though. So let's start with HCl at the top. When naming binary covalent compounds, the name of the first element is not changed. This means that I can already write hydrogen, but when it comes to the second element, in this case chlorine, the name is changed as though if it were an anion. So chlorine becomes chloride. Thus, the name of a compound with the formula HCl is hydrogen chloride. The next compound has a formula N2O5. Based on the first two guidelines, I can already write nitrogen and then oxide. If this was an ionic compound, we would finish here. However, this is a covalent compound. And now we need to worry about these numbers in the subscript. We use prefixes to indicate the number of atoms present in the compound. What are these prefixes? Well, here they are. Mono, di, tri, tetra, penta, and so on. Each prefix stands for a particular number. So mono stands for 1, di for 2, tri for 3, and so on. Based on the formula, I have two nitrogens. The name needs to reflect this. So I'm going to write the prefix di in front of nitrogen. There are 5 oxygens, so I'm going to use the appropriate prefix to indicate that as well. Thus, the name of this compound is dinitrogen pentoxide. Note that in order to avoid awkward pronunciations, we often drop the final A or O of the prefix. So rather than having pentaoxide, we have just pentoxide. Let's look at the next formula. It is BF3. So I can already write boron fluoride. There are 3 fluorines, so this is actually trifluoride. At this stage you might be asking, well, why is it not monoboron trifluoride? After all, I have 1 boron. Should I not indicate that? Well, we have a guideline for that as well. In fact, we have 2 guidelines. The first one states that the prefix mono is not used when naming the first element. So if I only have one of the first element, there is no need for the mono prefix. Okay, with that in mind, let's look at CO. Based on the first 2 guidelines, I can already write carbon oxide. Based on the third guideline, I should use prefixes to indicate the number of atoms present. But based on the fourth guideline, I do not need the prefix mono for the first element. However, I do need it for the second one. So this oxide is actually monoxide. Note again that I have dropped the final O from mono in order to avoid awkward pronunciation. Rather than monooxide, we say monoxide. At this stage you might say, hold on you demented paperclip, what about hydrogen chloride? How come that is not hydrogen monochloride? Well, that is because prefixes are not used when the valencies are the same. Recall that hydrogen and chlorine have the same valency. They do not have the same number of valence electrons, but they do have the same valency. And in such cases, we do not use the prefixes. Based on these 5 guidelines, have a go at naming the final compound, CO2. So this compound is made up of carbon and oxygen, so I can already write carbon oxide. There is only 1 carbon, so I do not need the prefix mono. There are 2 oxygens, so I need to use the prefix di. Thus, the name of the compound with the formula CO2 is carbon dioxide. As this is chemistry, there are a few exceptions. Let me get rid of this and bring in those exceptions. The first one is H2O. Based on those previous guidelines, this would be dihydrogen oxide. However, no chemist would call H2O dihydrogen oxide. We have a highly technical term for this compound. We would call it water. What about NH3? Based on the guidelines, this would be nitrogen trihydride. However, we would call it ammonia. In case of CH4, you would be forgiven for calling it carbon tetrahydride. However, CH4 is considered an organic compound, and organic compounds have a naming convention of their own. We will jump off that bridge when we get to it. For now, you need to know that this compound is known as methane. The next two compounds, N2 and O2, are not exceptions, but there are two ways that we can talk about them. N2 can be called dinitrogen, and O2 can be referred to as dioxygen. However, we might also call them molecular nitrogen and molecular oxygen. The same is true for molecular halogens. So, for example, if I have Cl2, I could call it dichloride, or I might refer to it as molecular chlorine. So keep in mind, when naming binary covalent compounds, we have guidelines. However, there are a fair few exceptions. That is all for now, and I will see you on the flip side.